Remember PlayWin?
Every 5 seconds, somebody in India wins on PlayWin. 4 lakh winners every day. Win over 5 crores every week. Log on to myplaywin.com. Hello, India. Hello.
I know I'll never forget their logo and their tiny little hole in the wall stall in Chennai's Kodambakam from where they sold lottery tickets. How do I know this? My mom was among the many hopefuls who picked up 10 rupee tickets ever so often, hoping to win the lottery. Did she win? Well, I wish. It's a completely different story when we play cards, though. My mom always wins. I call her a mix of Sherlock Holmes and Shakuntala Devi. What makes my mom lose PlayWin and win at cards? Is she luckier in the latter or just more skilled? I would say the latter. But this skill versus chance debate has been on for years, and the government has yet been undecided on which games fall under which category. Here's the important thing though. It's a state subject, and it's safe to say that it is literally in a state of limbo. Tamil Nadu, where I stay, banned PlayWin almost 2 decades ago. And now, even poker and rummy are considered to be bracketed as games of chance. There are many players who play the game, some for recreation, others for a living. And the central government has come up with a set of rules on online gaming, and it seems like it wants to encourage it.
Our intention is that online gaming is a $200 billion industry. India has a tremendous amount of potential in terms of startups and investments. Our job is to ensure that investments come, more and more startups in the online gaming segment grow, and that 2023, as we grow the internet, as we grow various other segments of the tech economy, gaming becomes a significant component of the digital economy.
But why is it that some states have been against these games? Do the recently announced draft online gaming rules really make much of a difference? What do gamers feel about the ever-changing regulations around the space? How do they cope? And what is at stake for them? We find out all that and much more today as we speak to 2 gamers, Ashwath Harikumar and Varun Sridhar, to see the world of online gaming through their lens. We also get experts like Dhruv Garg, technology lawyer and head of legal at the All India Gaming Federation, and technology and gaming lawyer Jay Saita, to get into the technicalities of the draft rules and to decode what hits the bullseye and what missed the target by a mile. It is Thursday, Jan 19th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to Gaming Rules, Who is Really Being Played, on the Morning Brief from the Economic Times. India's gaming market, which has crossed the $500 million mark with 507 million gamers, has reached $2.6 billion, according to Interactive Media Venture Capital Fund, Lumikai, in its report in November last year. According to the report titled State of India Gaming Report FY22, the domestic gaming industry is expected to almost quadruple to $8.6 billion by 2027. In addition to this, India was also the world's largest consumer of mobile games in FY22, with 15 billion downloads in the year. But what better way to understand this space than hear it from the gamers' mouth? I spoke to Ashwath Harikumar and Varun Sridhar, who live in different parts of the country but share one thing in common: a love for poker. Ashwath stays in Bangalore and Varun in Mumbai. Both belong to states with very different outlooks to the gaming sector. And while they're all bound by their love for the game, their realities are pretty different. Listen in to find out how.
My poker journey actually started way back in school. Learned the game from some of my friends, and there was a craze of Zynga poker on Facebook back then, around 2010, 2011 or so. And then poker just stopped for me. until I was just trying to see what else do I want to do in life. And somehow just got hooked onto watching a lot of poker videos. I think this is pretty much a very generic story for most poker players. So it really kicked on again for me mid 2021. And I've just been sort of slowly getting into the space ever since then.
Ashwath, you've been familiar with poker since your school days, but you mentioned that your love for the game really blossomed during the pandemic. Now that you've been playing for some time, I just wanted to get an idea of how high the stakes are when you play now.
So for me, I'm still very new to this. So in terms of how much money I put in is still on the lower side. There is a
Okay.
range, but my personal experience, I've been focusing only on playing poker tournaments. So you have two types of games. One are cash games, which are the most common ones. All your home games and other games are cash games where each chip is considered money. But you have tournaments, which is based on a ranking system. You buy into the tournament similar to a registration fee, and the winner has a prize money, the second place has a prize money, the third place has a prize money, and so on. Your higher the buy-in for the tournament, higher your payouts will be, and so on.
Sure.
So right now I've been focusing on tournaments which cost between 500 to 2000 rupees, just because there is a concept called bankroll management in poker, which really teaches you in terms of how to know which sort of tournaments to play. The biggest win that I made was around 1.8 lakhs. So the difference
Yeah.
between tournaments and cash games is the fact that upskilling yourself really gives you an edge in tournaments. Just to give you an example, the tournament that really paid me 1.8 lakhs, the buy-in would have been around 2000 rupees. I mean, you don't come first every day, you don't come first every tournament.
Naturally,
But yeah,
fair.
that's how that is really structured.
Now, when you speak of big bucks, right? I mean,
Mhm.
what is the most that you can get in a day?
I'm just probably going to talk only about tournaments. In tournaments, the biggest I've heard of is there was a tournament last year called GOAT, called Greatest of All Tournaments on specific Indian app, where the person that finished first, I think, made over 90 lakhs in that one tournament alone. So there is a lot of money in the game. I mean, it is glittery, right? The whole structure of this, having to pay 2000 and having a shot at
Yeah,
winning 1.8 lakhs is
absolutely.
very glittery. But the structure of the game is such that any dog can have its day, but to consistently make a living out of it, to consistently get the benefits out of the sport, you need to be upskilling yourself. You need to be thinking in the right directions. You need to be training yourself with respect to mindset and a whole bunch of other things. Otherwise, very likely that you'll make 2 lakhs with one tournament and you'll end up spending a lot more over the next 10 days because you think you're really good now, but that's just the fact
Right.
that the game is structured in that way.
Now, coming to this very controversial word of luck, right? Because in the context of poker, at least, some people call it a game of skill, which is what it's been recognized by most, right? But there
Mhm.
are quite a few states that still consider it a game of chance. How do you view that as someone who plays the game? One,
Mhm.
do you really think it's fair to even think of calling it a game of chance?
I think it's just unfortunate that poker has been played at casinos and it's always been tagged with a lot of casino games, which are primarily games of chance. And ask any poker enthusiast, they would be able to tell you who the top 4 5 players in the world are. They'll talk about Phil Ivey, they'll talk about Daniel Negreanu, and a few common names. And that happens only in a situation where there is skill involved. When it's a game of chance, it's highly unlikely that the same group of 4 5 people will be consistently winning. I mean, that's how chance operates. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and it's all a coin flip. But that being said, I wouldn't say there is absolutely no chance in this game at all. It does have an element of luck involved in it. And that's pretty much how the game is structured. So I would say it's around 80-90% skill involved and 10% luck.
When you're playing these games, do you use VPN networks to play or do you use mobile apps or how do you access these poker tournaments and so on as well?
So thankfully, right now in India, there are, I think, a set of poker apps that have come up and who have
Hmm.
really upped the game since the pandemic. So have a set of consistent tournaments running on these apps every day. They have certain features that come up based on seasons and which are probably a lot more profitable. Yeah, because of that, don't really have to use a VPN or anything. It's directly accessible to me. And also because thankfully I stay in Karnataka. It's a lot more difficult when I have to travel to somewhere in Tamil Nadu or Telangana because all these apps don't open in those states since they're banned by the state.
Straight from Bangalore, we now travel around 1,000 kilometers to reach the country's financial capital, Mumbai, where Varun has been playing poker professionally for over 3 years now after working in radio. Like Ashwath, he too discovered his love for poker early on and played it on the side while doing his full-time job before taking the plunge into doing it professionally. To start off, I asked Varun if he played cash games or tournaments like Ashwath does.
I don't play tournaments, I play cash. So poker, basically, there are two sides to it. There's tournament play and there's cash play. So tournament play is a different format. I think tournaments are more riskier because in cash games, you can sit and you get up whenever you want. But when you enter a tournament, you are playing to win that tournament. And you get only one chance. In a cash game, you can reload and play again. In a tournament, when you buy in for a certain amount and you're playing for that price, you don't get too many shots. So every mistake matters. In cash, you can learn from your mistakes and try again and, play again and try to win and try to succeed. So that's the basic difference.
Varun, you've been a part of the scene for a while, and I wanted to understand that, whether you have players or people in your circle who've moved to another state because regulation may have become tougher in their home state.
I know a couple of people who have changed base. They live in a different state now because they want to pursue playing poker online and it's not allowed in their state. So yeah, it's like a job you would do in a different state where you think that in this state, my potential is capped.
My takeaway is that Maharashtra is definitely kinder to gaming than Karnataka. And this is important because the biggest conundrum in gaming and its rules is it a state subject or center? Tamil Nadu has never been very kind to these games. I spoke to some gamers in Chennai who said that they had to stop playing these games completely, either because the apps don't work in the region or for fear of breaking the law. And there were a few others who said that they use VPN networks and continue to play these games. Some serious players have even shifted base to other states where the rules are more lax. There's a lot of cultural context that goes into drafting rules and regulations. The Public Gambling Act in India has also been left untouched because gambling in India is largely a state subject. That also explains why one can see casinos in Goa, Sikkim, and Daman and Diu, but not in Hyderabad or Chennai. But there are multiple other unresolved court cases between online gaming intermediaries or OGIs and the tax authorities. The taxmen say poker is a game of chance and should attract 28% GST like gambling. The OGIs say it's a game of skill and should be taxed at 18%. There are also many allegations of money laundering and round-tripping too, considering many of the poker companies are headquartered overseas. So what are the rules that the government, or more specifically the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, or MeitY, have come up with? Here's a quick primer. A self-regulatory body, mandatory KYC or Know Your Customer norms for verification, and a grievance redressal mechanism are among the key proposals in the draft rules for online gaming, which were released by MeitY on Jan 2nd. Online games will have to register with a self-regulatory body, and only games cleared by the body will be allowed to legally operate in India. The proposed rules also state that online gaming companies will not be allowed to engage in betting on the outcome of games. These rules came out just a week after MeitY said it would be the nodal agency for online gaming. Here's what Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, said on the rules.
It is not a question of whether it's a game of skill or game of chance. It's basically a prohibition of wagering on any game. So nobody is going into the underlying whether it is a game of skill or game of chance or any of that. Nothing that permits you to wager on the outcome of a game shall be permitted. Rules and laws apply to everybody. These are the do's and don'ts in terms of gaming intermediaries. There are gaming, of course, online gaming will be permitted, except for those that allow for wagering on the outcome of the game. So we are not regulating gambling. That's why it's called online gaming intermediaries. It is clearly our intent that no intermediary advertises anything other than a permitted online gaming intermediary. States can do whatever they want to do vis-a-vis gambling and betting. Our job and our duty is to regulate the internet. Gaming becomes a significant component of the digital economy. For that, we are prescribing the rules. What happens at the state, that is not something that we are stepping into. We are interested in growing the online gaming ecosystem. And we want to do that in a way where it does not contravene any local or state laws. But online gaming will not be permitted if they tend to transgress into betting.
But will this really move the needle? How do these rules make a difference when ultimately it's a state subject, right? I had just as many questions as you did. So I turned my focus to Dhruv Garg, technology lawyer and head of legal at the All India Gaming Federation or AIGF, to explain the rules of the game, or in this case, the draft rules for online gaming.
So I think broadly speaking, this is a user-centric rule. If you look at the definition of online games under the rules that have been drafted, it says an online game is a game which is offered online, which can be accessed by a player through a computer resource, where the player makes a deposit with the expectation of making winnings. It doesn't cover all online games. It only covers online games where money is involved, where you pay to play. So that's why, broadly speaking, you see two main elements to it. One is the protection measures in place, and the other is a grievance redressal mechanism where the company has to have the first tier of grievance redressal. If they don't work, then the SRB, the self-regulatory body, will have a second tier. And then they can go to even a government appellate committee under the intermediary to 2021 rules. And obviously, because of this happening, the industry is getting a recognition and a standardized approach by the government. So that's a good win-win for the industry as well.
These rules are great on paper, but at the end of the day, it boils down to what the states put into practice. So is that a concern still? Because there are many states which equate online gaming to gambling and those kinds of things as well.
What the rules are saying is that we will not take away the power of the state under betting and gambling, because that's constitutionally given to them. But any game which falls outside betting and gambling, which has money involved, which will be governed by these rules. So effectively what is happening is only games of skill qualify to be regulated under these rules. The debate as to how the states will take note of this, we have to see.
Got it. Now, coming back to the points that you mentioned earlier, in terms of these online gaming intermediaries, could you just explain to our listeners what they are, what they do, how many are there, and what the current structure is like?
When you talk about the online gaming sector, right now in India, there are broadly three formats in terms of revenue model. So we will talk about the revenue model based classification. In that, you will have free to play games. You will have freemium where you have in-app purchases, but you can still play for free if you want to. And there are pay to play games where you pay money and then you compete with another person and then you win money if you win that game. You don't play against the platform. You play only against your friend or someone else. The third category, that is pay to play, is what is defined under these rules. Now, what is a pay to play game and how these function on a platform? So what will happen is, let's say you have a game of chess. You can play chess normally, but let's say if platform is giving a game of chess, what can happen is you and me, that is Dhruv and Dia, come to that platform. They say, okay, we both will play chess, but let's put 10 rupees each. That's usually the ticket size, 10, 20, 50 max. And whoever wins will take the money. And what the platform will do is they will only take usually 10% of that. So they will take 10% as the service fee, that is 2 rupees out. 18 rupees will become your award money. And whoever wins that game of chess will take that 18 rupees out as winning. And this is the format of these pay-to-play games. And these rules, what they're doing, because there is money in and money out, these rules are saying that when the user are playing, there should be enough protection inbuilt so that the user can comfortably know that they are playing on a safe platform.
So, Dhruv, what do the draft rules lay down as specifications for gaming intermediaries in order to make them more accountable?
If you will strictly look at the rules, what the rules say is that anyone can offer these games, but they need to do 4 things that are connected to India. One, they need to definitely have a address in India where any communication can be sent in relation to these rules.
Okay.
So you need to have a domestic presence in that sense. You need to have 3 officers who are resident of India. These 3 officers are A, you need to have a nodal officer who can talk to law enforcement agencies. He or she has to be an employee and a resident of India. You need to have a chief compliance officer who will be liable for compliance of these rules under the IT Act and the rules. That person has to be a key managerial person and a resident of India. So that's another big step in terms of connecting it to India. Then you need to also have a grievance redressal officer, correct? A grievance officer again in India. So what they are saying is that obviously if you're an Indian company, it will be applicable. But even if you're a foreign company directly offering game in India, you need to have these 4 connections to India, these 3 residents in India and the address in India, so that you have a connection and you don't follow the law, the Indian government can reach you.
One of the things that I have been speaking to a lot of stakeholders and they've sort of highlighted as a concern almost is that it'll just end up being this big boys club and there will be like cartelization of rules and standards to be followed by smaller players. So that in effect could sort of stifle competition and not really have the industry's best interests in mind. So do you think that is a valid concern to have? Because it isn't a government body, right?
I think any industry, be it big tech or be it any sector, there's always fear of competition trying to out you either on a regulatory level or on a sort of a market level. But let's see the opposite of this. Let's say we don't have these rules. So there are only 2 things. Either the government steps in and say, we will register each game and give a license. You're going back to 1990s license, Raj, the one that put us in that economic turmoil.
Right.
Or you leave all the companies to just run free. Now the thing is, what is then the best of both worlds? So the best of both worlds is, ideally at least, and I think 99% of the industry will agree to it, that you have a self-regulatory organizations or bodies who sort of have to take inputs from the industry because they are self-regulatory. But the self-regulatory body has a sort of a check by the government, because it's not that the self-regulatory body will work in isolation. But I would suggest that most of the industry would say that it's better to let such a sensitive industry run amok without any regulation, or to go on the very extreme and ask the government to please regulate 50,000 games and give license to it. I'm assuming this is the best case that they could think of, and at least most of the industry agrees with.
What level should income tax be levied at? I mean, because there are such huge allegations of, massive tax evasions and round tripping as well. So how do you respond to this?
Definitely, TDS issue is a concern for government. Let me break down it to you in 2 aspects. One, there's no doubt about the rate of income tax on winnings in these games, correct? It's 30%, state and state. No one debates that. But the other thing under Section 194, what you see is that there is a responsibility on the organizer of those games or the person who's paying that winning to cut 30% TDS if the amount is above 10,000. And that is where the confusion is, or that is where the government sort of is confused. What they are saying is that whether this 10,000 limit is per game or whether it is 10,000 cumulatively on a platform over a year. There are also questions as to whether the winnings are net or whether it's gross. The problem that the government has is that if the companies cut TDS, then there is a record with this, because the TDS is filed, etc., your Form 26AS, there will be transaction data there, so the government can know which person has earned what winnings. But if the companies don't cut TDS, then it is on the player to disclose it on their own, and sometimes they don't. As of now, the law says it's very clear it should be 10,000 per game as such, but some people read it in a different way. So it's a slightly technical and sort of a debatable issue, which I think government will give clarification to soon enough.
Dhruv, if I can ask you to list out 3 points that you really feel are big wins in these rules and 3 things that you feel need a little bit more work, what would you say?
The first thing, again, not to sound like a broken record, standardization of user protection measures, including not giving access to children under the age of 18.
Right.
Things to control negative behavior or excessive engagement. 2, having something like a self-regulatory body structure where there is not over-regulation, but there is no regulation at all. So it's a balancing. 3rd is introducing a grievance redressal mechanism for this industry. I think that's a huge win. These 3 things are, I think, the salient features of these rules. In terms of negative, there are a few things which any rules have. One big example of this is that we will seek clarity as to when there's a provision of registering each game that comes in by the self-regulatory body. We have to see at what point they want registration. It would have been ideal if the registration is done after the games are launched. But we'll have to ask MATI as to at what time, how much time the game companies have to register those games. Clarity on the registration timelines, etc., is something which is important from the market perspective, because there's obviously a first mover advantage attached to launching games. And the second thing could be that the government could look, so their provision of, let's say, chief compliance officer, etc. I think the government can look at a graded approach to that also. So broadly speaking, I think those are the things that we might have to seek clarification from the ministry.
But is it really that simple? Technology and gaming lawyer Jay Saita decides to introduce us to the villains in the game who are creating chaos amongst the players and putting up hoops that the gamers have to jump through. Here's what he had to say.
There are several issues of concern that arise, including whether the power to regulate under the IT Act indeed is there with the government or not. Although, in principle, the intention of the government has to be appreciated, and there is no doubt that some regulations are required for this sector.
Taking off from what you had said just now, I was reading one of the articles that you were quoted in, and you said that the rules are a farrago of confusing and contradictory provisions. Could you explain to our listeners why you believe this? Because you kind of hinted at, a number of things arising when you do a deep dive, but specifically to say that they are confusing and contradictory. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So, firstly, when you look at certain definitions, like the definition of online game, it says that game offered on the internet where a person makes a deposit with the expectation of winnings. So that part of it does not differentiate between what are games of skill and games of chance. However, if you look at the Rule 3, where there is some amendment which says that the online gaming intermediaries should not offer anything which violates the law relating to gambling or betting. So what is gambling and betting? What is the online game? The demarcation between skill-based and chance-based games is all left unclear and uncertain, and does not solve the demand of the industry or practically solve the issues of skill and chance and which games are finally going to be permitted or not. So that is one issue that arises from the rules. The second is under Rule 6A, it says that the government may notify any game which does not involve deposit where the same set of do's and don'ts apply to that particular game. Now, issues like KYC, issues like policies relating to financial losses, policies relating to random number generation certificate and no bot certificate, responsible gaming, addiction, etc., arise only in case of real money games where there is wins and losses, deposits and winnings. In case of non-deposit based games, these rules do not even arise, are not even applicable. So the government trying to apply this set of principles to a game which does not involve deposit is itself contradictory and kind of defeats the purpose of why the rules are brought in the first place.
One of the provisions in the draft rules was to set up a self-regulatory body, right? Now, for something like online gaming where you have real socio-economic consequences, is this an effective way to go about regulation?
According to me, it is not, because self-regulatory body, it means the government is outsourcing its own functions to a private organization. So I have my own reservations on whether a self-regulatory body will work. Secondly, is the issue wherein most industry bodies that call themselves self-regulatory bodies today, they are funded and their board members are online gaming companies. So there is an inherent conflict and these issues will arise no matter. And the rules have certain provisions that there has to be no conflict of interest. 5 board members have to be appointed who are neutral people, etc. The other issue is about penalties. Nowhere in these rules is any penalty prescribed for not following these KYC procedures or other policies that have to be implemented. Nowhere does the rule provide any penalty. Now, without any mechanism where the erring gaming companies can be penalized, these rules may turn out to be a non-starter and cannot even be effectively implemented. And the self-regulatory bodies are not given powers to impose penalty, and neither can a private body impose penalty on a company. As you know, in the absence of any penal provisions, there is no guarantee that people would follow these provisions at all because they may just ignore it without facing any consequences.
So, when we're talking about light touch regulation, which is what is being spoken about so extensively when it comes to online gaming, what really is light touch regulation in your opinion? How do other countries also deal with this kind of space?
I mean, other countries have regulator, which is a government body or which is a statutory body to regulate online gaming. I have not seen self-regulatory bodies given complete powers to police this sector or regulate or control this sector at all. So that is something that is completely new. In terms of light touch regulations, yes, it could be the case that games of skill there should be certain less onerous requirements than, say, pure gambling or betting or some other sectors. That could be the case. But that does not mean that the power should be outsourced to a private body altogether, which has no global precedence really.
Right. So, in conclusion, Jay, if I can ask you to just list out maybe three things that you think really work in favor of the rules and three things that you feel really need to be addressed very soon, what would you say under each head?
I think one is the aspect where responsible gaming platforms or the online gaming companies have to clearly mention their responsible gaming policies. Secondly, they have to do a proper KYC. And thirdly, they cannot allow minors or those under 18 years to play these games. The three things that are not addressed, one is the entire distinction between games of skill and games of chance. Second is the immunity from state laws or what happens to state laws. That has not been addressed in the rules. And the third important thing that has not been addressed in the rules is the entire self-regulatory aspect and why the powers of the government have been outsourced to a private body. And the other thing is the government has not waited for the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is pending on the issue of who has the power, center or states, and who can legislate on it, and whether games of skill, whether they can be regulated, how they can be regulated, etc.
I decided to do a small experiment. I downloaded an app for rummy and poker on my phone. So it asked me for my location and I allowed it access to it. And then I did what most of us don't do while giving permission to an app. I read the terms of service. I read them so that you don't have to. And basically what it says is that Tamil Nadu, Meghalaya, Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Odisha, Sikkim, Nagaland and Telangana are termed restricted territories and don't permit their residents to play cash games or tournaments online. So if you stay in one of these places, then you probably shouldn't be playing online rummy or poker. Also, even if you're visiting these states, you're not permitted to play these games. Now, poker and rummy continue to be popular, and with the widespread advertising and the lure of easy money, it's unsurprising that its popularity is only increasing by the day. But in the absence of a firm set of rules, a nodal body, and the state versus center debate, many don't participate in it, openly at least. While the central government seems to recognize the huge promise that the sector provides for India, there are a number of unresolved issues that need to be ironed out. Be it the debates on taxes, cases of alleged tax evasions worth thousands of crores, money laundering and round-tripping, or even plain fraud. While the new rules bring some semblance of a structure, like a self-regulatory body, KYC, or even a grievance redressal mechanism, it creates some confusion about who will man the body and how effective such a mechanism could be. The industry expects some clarity on taxes in the upcoming budget, but are unsure whether that will happen. We'll make sure to watch out for what happens in the budget and keep you informed about the latest in the gaming space and everything else that happens in the world of business and economics. So stay tuned. Thank you Ashwath, Varun, Dhruv and Jay for all your amazing insights. It's Thursday, Jan 19th. I'm your host Diya Rekhi and you are listening to Gaming Rules, Who's Really Being Played on the Morning Brief from the Economic Times. This podcast is brought to you by the team at Economic Times. Thank you for tuning in. Show producer for this episode, Vinay Joshi. Sound designer, Rajas Nayak. Executive producers Anupriya Bahadur, Anirban Chaudhary, and Arijit Barman. We hope you liked this episode. Do share it on your social media networks. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday and is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, and Google Podcasts, as well as JioSaavn. Do tune in to ET Play for all audio content, including The Morning Brief. All clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.